I never thought owning 30 acres of pristine Montana wilderness would turn into a legal nightmare. But when the Summit Ridge HOA decided my private road was their personal snow removal service, everything changed. My name is Kyle Morrison, and I bought my property in Whitefish, Montana, 3 years ago specifically because it offered privacy and independence. The land came with a half-mile private driveway that connected to County Road 219, which itself branched off from Highway 93. When I purchased the property, there was no HOA. The previous owner had been a hermit who rarely interacted with anyone, and the surrounding area was mostly undeveloped forest land owned by the state. Everything was perfect until Bridget Bancroft moved into the area. About 8 months ago, a development company purchased 200 acres adjacent to my property and began constructing what they called Summit Ridge Estates, a collection of expensive mountain homes marketed to wealthy retirees and seasonal residents from California and Washington. The development came with all the usual amenities: a community lodge, tennis courts, and a network of private roads winding through the property. Bridget was one of the first residents to move in, and within 2 months, she had somehow gotten herself elected as the HOA president. The problem started in November, right after the first heavy snowfall. I was in my workshop when I heard the sound of a vehicle struggling up my driveway. I walked outside to find a silver Mercedes SUV spinning its wheels about 200 yards from my house. A woman in her late 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a white parka that probably cost more than my truck climbed out, her face already pinched in irritation. "Excuse me," she called out, not bothering with any greeting. "Do you know when this road will be plowed?" "I have a meeting in town in 20 minutes. I looked at her, then at my driveway, then back at her. "This is my private driveway. I plow it when I need to use it." Her expression shifted from irritation to indignation. "Private? This road connects to the Summit Ridge development. It is clearly a shared access road." "No, it is not," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "This driveway serves my property exclusively. Your development has its own access road that connects directly to County Road 219 about a quarter-mile east of here." Bridget pulled out her phone and tapped at it furiously. "That is ridiculous. This road would provide much more convenient access to the highway for the northern section of our community. I am Bridget Bancroft, president of the Summit Ridge HOA, and I will be looking into this matter." Before I could respond, she got back in her Mercedes and performed an elaborate 16-point turn before heading back down my driveway. I shook my head and returned to my workshop, figuring that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was printed on expensive cream-colored stationery with the Summit Ridge HOA logo embossed at the top. The letter informed me that the HOA board had voted to designate my driveway as an auxiliary access road for the northern residents of Summit Ridge. As such, I was now responsible for maintaining it to HOA standards, which included plowing within 2 hours of any snowfall exceeding 2 inches, salting during icy conditions, and filling any potholes within 48 hours of notification. The letter concluded by informing me that failure to comply would result in fines of $500 per day until the issue was resolved. I read the letter 3 times, certain I was missing something. They could not possibly believe they had the authority to claim my private property and then demand I maintain it for their benefit. I called my lawyer, Patricia Hendricks, who had handled my property purchase. "They sent you what?" Patricia sounded like she was trying not to laugh. "A letter claiming my driveway is now their auxiliary access road and demanding I plow it for them. Kyle, do you have your property deed handy?" Yeah, hold on. I pulled the document from my filing cabinet and set it on the kitchen table. Look at the legal description and the easement section. Tell me what it says about access rights. I scanned through the dense legal language. It says I have exclusive access rights to the private drive designated as Morrison Lane, running approximately half a mile from County Road 219 to the main residence. No easements are granted to adjacent properties. Perfect. That means nobody else has any legal right to use your driveway, period. This HOA letter is completely meaningless. They have no authority over you or your property. So I just ignore it. Exactly. Keep the letter for documentation, but you are under no obligation to respond or comply. If they continue to harass you, let me know and we will send them a cease and desist. I felt relieved but also uneasy. Something told me this would not be the end of it, and I was right. 2 weeks later, we got another major snowstorm. I woke up to find 18 inches of fresh powder blanketing everything. After breakfast, I climbed into my Plow truck, a 1998 Ford F350 with a 7-foot blade mounted to the front, and spent 90 minutes clearing my driveway. The snow was light and fluffy, which made the job easier, but there was so much of it that I had to make several passes to build proper snowbanks on either side. I had just finished and was backing the truck into my garage when I heard voices. I walked back outside to find 3 people standing at the end of my driveway where it met County Road 219. Bridget was there along with 2 men I did not recognize. One was tall and heavyset with a red face and expensive outdoor gear. The other was thin and nervous-looking, carrying a clipboard. "There he is," Bridget announced, pointing at me like I was a criminal. "Mr. Morrison, you realize you are in violation of HOA regulations. This road should have been plowed 2 hours ago according to the snowfall timeline. This is my private driveway, Mrs. Bancroft." "I already explained that to you." The red-faced man stepped forward. "I am Donald Richards, chairman of the Summit Ridge HOA board. We have reviewed the situation, and we believe there has been a misunderstanding about the nature of this access road." "There has been no misunderstanding," I said. "This is my property. You have no authority here." "Now see here," Donald blustered. "We represent a community of 47 homeowners who have paid significant money for properties in Summit Ridge. The development was marketed with convenient highway access, and this road represents the most direct route for residents in the northern section. Then you should speak to your developer about that marketing. My driveway has nothing to do with Summit Ridge." The thin man with the clipboard cleared his throat. "Mr. Morrison, I am Jeffrey Paulson, the HOA attorney. While we acknowledge that the property records show this as a private drive, we believe there is a basis for establishing an easement by necessity. The northern residents of Summit Ridge have limited access options, and this road would significantly improve their quality of life." I stared at him. "Are you seriously arguing that you should get to use my property because it would be more convenient for you?" "Easement by necessity is a recognized legal principle," Jeffrey said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "When property lacks reasonable access to public roads, the courts can grant an easement across neighboring property. Your development has access to County Road 219. You have reasonable access. You just want better access, and that is not my problem." Bridget stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mr. Morrison, Kyle, we are all neighbors here. Surely we can come to some arrangement. What if the HOA were to compensate you for the plowing services? Say $200 per month during the winter season. I do not want your money. I want you to leave me alone and use your own roads." Her expression hardened immediately. "Fine. Then you leave us no choice." As of today, you are in violation of HOA regulations and fines will begin accruing at $500 per day. We will also be filing a lawsuit to establish the easement our residents deserve. File whatever you want, I said, but stay off my property. I turned and walked back to my house, my hands shaking with anger. Behind me, I heard them arguing among themselves, their voices carrying across the snow. I called Patricia as soon as I got inside. They are threatening to sue for an easement by necessity, I told her. That is absurd. They have access to their property. Let them file. It will be thrown out, but document everything. Take pictures of your property markers, your driveway, and their actual access road. If they set foot on your property without permission, that is trespassing. Over the next week, things escalated. Bridget sent me daily emails with photographs of my unplowed driveway and calculations of the fines I was supposedly accruing. I deleted them without responding. Then residents from Summit Ridge started driving up my driveway anyway, assuming it was public access. I installed a chain across the entrance with a large sign reading, "Private property, no trespassing, Morrison residents only." The chain lasted 3 days before someone cut it. I installed a gate with a lock. The gate lasted 5 days before I found it forced open, the lock broken. That was when I decided to take more decisive action. The next snowstorm hit on a Saturday in December. The Weather Service predicted 2 feet of accumulation over 48 hours. I watched the snow fall throughout Friday night and all day Saturday, letting it pile up undisturbed. By Sunday morning, my driveway was impassable, a smooth white blanket running from County Road 219 to my house. I fired up my plow truck and went to work, but this time I had a different plan. Instead of clearing a path down the middle of my driveway, I used the blade to push all the snow from the upper portion of my property down to the entrance. I spent 3 hours carefully constructing a massive snowbank directly across the entrance to my driveway, where it met the county road. The bank was 6 feet high and about 15 feet deep, a solid wall of packed snow that completely blocked the entrance. Then I installed a new gate. This one was heavy-duty steel, 8 feet tall, with a high security lock and concrete footings that I had prepared and sunk during the fall. I mounted a large sign on the gate. "Private property, no public access, violators will be prosecuted, Morrison residents." I also installed a trail camera facing the gate, positioned to capture anyone who approached it. Finally, I plowed a clean path from the snowbank to my house, leaving me with full access to my property while making it impossible for anyone else to use my driveway without serious equipment. The reaction was immediate and explosive. By Monday morning, I had 17 voicemails, 32 emails, and someone had called the county sheriff. Deputy Jake Wilson, who I had met a few times in town, drove up County Road 219 and parked next to the snowbank. I walked down to meet him. "Morning, Kyle," he said, eyeing the massive wall of snow. "Got a call about a blocked road." "Morning, Jake. As you can see, my private driveway is blocked. I have not blocked any public road." He walked around the snowbank, examining it. "This is definitely your property, 100%. The property line runs along the edge of the county road. Everything from this point up to my house is mine. And that gate, also on my property, securing my private driveway." Jake pulled out his phone and took a few pictures. "I have been getting calls from some HOA president lady. She says you are blocking access to the Summit Ridge development. Summit Ridge has their own access road about a quarter-mile east. They just want to use my driveway because it is more convenient." That is what I figured. Listen, between you and me, those HOA people are driving everyone at the department crazy. They call about everything. Last week someone called because their neighbor's Christmas lights were the wrong shade of white. He shook his head. You are not breaking any laws here. It is your property. But expect more complaints. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate you coming out. He tipped his hat and drove off. I walked back to my house, satisfied with the morning's outcome, but the day was far from over. Around noon, a black BMW pulled up to the Snowbank and Bridget got out, followed by Donald Richards and Jeffrey Paulson, the HOA attorney. Bridget was dressed in an expensive-looking red coat with fur trim, and her face was already flushed with anger before she even saw me. I watched them from my window for a few minutes, then walked down to the gate. Mr. Morrison, Jeffrey called out, we need to discuss this situation immediately. There is nothing to discuss. This is my property and I will manage it as I see fit. You cannot do this, Bridget shrieked. You are deliberately blocking access and creating a public nuisance. I am managing my private property. How is that a public nuisance? The northern residents of Summit Ridge use this road daily. You are cutting off their access. They have their own access road. Use it. Donald stepped forward, trying to look authoritative. This is harassment, Morrison. You have deliberately created this obstacle to spite the HOA. I have managed my property as I choose. If you have a legal issue with that, speak to your attorney. Jeffrey cleared his throat. Mr. Morrison, we are prepared to file for an emergency injunction compelling you to remove this snowbank and keep the road clear for public access. File whatever you want. This is private property and it will remain blocked until I decide otherwise. You are making a serious mistake, Bridget hissed. The HOA has resources and connections you cannot imagine. We will bury you in legal fees. Is that a threat? It is a promise. No one defies this HOA. I pulled out my phone and held it up, showing them I was recording. Please repeat that threat for the record. All three of them stiffened. Jeffrey grabbed Bridget's arm and pulled her back toward the BMW. We will be in touch through legal channels, he said stiffly. They drove off, and I immediately sent the video to Patricia along with a summary of what had happened. She called me back within the hour. They are going to file for an injunction, she said. It will be denied because they have no legal basis, but it will require you to appear in court. Are you prepared for that? Absolutely. I am done with these people. Good. I will start preparing our response. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction, every email, every threat. We are going to need it. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of legal activity. The HOA filed for their emergency injunction on Tuesday. The hearing was scheduled for Friday morning in Flathead County District Court in Kalispell. Patricia filed our response on Wednesday, including photographs of the property deed, surveys showing the property boundaries, and documentation of Summit Ridge's actual access road. On Thursday, things took an uglier turn. I was working in my garage when I heard the sound of machinery. I walked outside to find a large front-end loader working at the base of my driveway, its operator attempting to clear the snowbank I had created. 2 men in Summit Ridge maintenance uniforms were directing the operation. Stop, I yelled, running down the driveway. You are on private property. The operator could not hear me over the noise of the machine. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. This is Kyle Morrison at 2847 County Road 219. There are people trespassing on my property with heavy equipment, attempting to remove a snow barrier I installed. The dispatcher assured me a deputy was on the way. I stood to the side, recording everything on my phone. The loader operator was making good progress, having cleared about 1/3 of the snowbank when Deputy Wilson arrived with lights flashing. Shut it down, Jake called out. The operator killed the engine. What is going on here? Jake asked. One of the maintenance workers stepped forward. We were sent by the Summit Ridge HOA to clear this blocked road. This is private property, Jake said. Did you get permission from the property owner? We were told this was HOA business. Did you get permission from the property owner? Jake repeated. No, but then you are trespassing. I need you to leave immediately, all of you. But the HOA does not own this property and has no authority here. Leave now or I will cite you for criminal trespass. The workers climbed into the loader and a pickup truck and drove away. Jake turned to me. You got that on video. Every second. Good. File a formal trespass complaint when you get a chance. This is getting out of hand. I filed the complaint that afternoon, naming the Summit Ridge HOA as responsible for sending the workers onto my property. Patricia added it to our court documentation. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed in my best suit, which I normally only wore to weddings and funerals, and met Patricia at the courthouse. The hearing was in a small courtroom on the second floor. Bridget was there with Donald, Jeffrey, and 2 other HOA board members I had not met before. They all wore expensive suits and had an air of confidence that I found irritating. Judge Margaret Yates presided. She was in her early 60s with gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. After we all settled in, she reviewed the paperwork in front of her. This is a request for emergency injunction, she said. The Summit Ridge HOA is requesting that the court compel Mr. Morrison to remove a snowbank blocking what they claim is a shared access road and to maintain that road for public use. Mr. Morrison claims the road is his private driveway. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Jeffrey Paulson said, standing. The HOA believes there is sufficient basis to establish this as a shared access road serving both Mr. Morrison's property and the northern residents of Summit Ridge Estates. And the basis for this belief: convenience and necessity, Your Honor. The northern residents of Summit Ridge have limited access options, and this road provides the most direct route to the highway. Judge Yates looked at Patricia. Counsel for the defense, Patricia stood. Your Honor, this is simply a case of an HOA wanting to use someone else's property without permission or compensation. Mr. Morrison purchased this property with a clearly designated private driveway. There are no easements, no shared access agreements, and no legal basis whatsoever for the HOA's claims. Summit Ridge has its own dedicated access road, which I have documented in the filed materials. This is not an easement by necessity situation because the HOA properties already have reasonable access to public roads. They simply want more convenient access at Mr. Morrison's expense. Your Honor, Jeffrey interjected. The addition of this auxiliary access route was implied in the marketing materials when these properties were sold. Homeowners relied on that access when making their purchases. Did Mr. Morrison provide those marketing materials? Judge Yates asked. No, but did Mr. Morrison agree to allow access across his property? Not explicitly, but Mr. Paulson, I have reviewed the property records. This is clearly private property with no easements. The fact that a developer may have misled buyers about access options is not Mr. Morrison's problem. As for easement by necessity, your own documents show that Summit Ridge has functional access to County Road 219. The emergency injunction is denied. The HOA has no authority over Mr. Morrison's property. Is there anything else? Bridget stood up abruptly. Your Honor, this is outrageous. That man has deliberately blocked access and created a hostile environment for our community. He is harassing us. Madam, are you an attorney? No, I am the HOA president. Then please sit down and let your attorney speak for you. Bridget slowly sat, her face crimson. Your Honor, Jeffrey said carefully, May we at least compel Mr. Morrison to remove the snowbank? It creates a visibility hazard on the county road. Deputy Wilson already inspected the site and found no traffic safety issues. The snowbank is entirely on private property. Denied. This hearing is concluded. We filed out of the courtroom. I could hear Bridget arguing furiously with Jeffrey in the hallway. Patricia and I took the stairs down to the parking lot. That went well, Patricia said, but this probably is not over. People like that do not give up easily. She was right. Over the next week, the harassment intensified. Someone spray-painted profanity on my mailbox. I received dozens of angry calls from Summit Ridge residents demanding I remove the snowbank. Someone drove through my fence line on the north side of my property, causing about $2,000 in damage. I reported each incident to the sheriff's department and installed additional security cameras around my property. Then things got worse. On a Tuesday evening in early January, I was eating dinner when I heard voices and saw lights moving near the gate. I pulled up the security camera feed on my laptop and saw 5 people gathered at the snowbank, illuminated by flashlights and phone screens. Bridget was there, along with Donald Richards and 3 other people I assumed were HOA members. They were discussing something, their breath fogging in the cold air. Then one of the men pulled out a set of bolt cutters and approached my gate. I grabbed my phone and called 911 again, then pulled on my coat and boots. By the time I got down to the gate, the man with the bolt cutters had cut through the lock and was pushing the gate open. The others were starting to walk through onto my property. "Stop right there," I shouted. "You are trespassing. The police are on their way." "This is community access," Bridget said. "We have every right to use this road. You have no rights here. This is private property and you are breaking and entering. We have decided that this gate represents an unlawful barrier to neighborhood access. We are exercising our right to remove obstacles that impact our quality of life." I held up my phone. "I have recorded everything you just said, and my security cameras captured you cutting my lock and entering my property. You are committing multiple crimes." "Crimes," Donald laughed. "This is civil disobedience. We are standing up for our rights as homeowners. You are not homeowners on this property. You are criminals." Sirens sounded in the distance. The group looked at each other nervously. One of the women I did not recognize started backing away. "Bridget, maybe we should go." "Absolutely not. We are in the right here." 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled up, and Deputies Wilson and Sarah Martinez climbed out. Jake assessed the situation quickly, his eyes moving from the cut lock to the open gate to the group standing on my driveway. "Evening, folks. I need everyone to step back onto the county road right now." "Deputy, we are exercising our right to access a community road," Bridget said. "Madam, this is private property. You are trespassing. Step back now. We have rights." "Step back now or I will place you under arrest." Slowly, grudgingly, the group moved back through the gate onto the county road. Deputy Martinez was examining the cut lock, taking photographs. "Who cut this lock?" Jake asked. Silence. Then Bridget spoke up. "We collectively decided to remove the unlawful barrier." "So you are admitting you damaged Mr. Morrison's property?" "It is not his property. This is a community access road." "Madam, we have been over this. Judge Yates already ruled on this. This is private property. You just committed criminal mischief by destroying the lock, and you all committed criminal trespass by entering the property without permission." Jeffrey Paulson's car pulled up. He jumped out, looking panicked. "Nobody say anything else." "Too late for that, counselor," Jake said. "I have statements from everyone here." Jeffrey pulled Bridget aside and they had a whispered conversation. I could see her face getting redder as he talked. Finally, he turned back to Jake. "Deputy, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. My clients were simply trying to survey the area to determine if there might be a basis for claiming adverse possession or establishing a prescriptive easement. By cutting a lock and trespassing at night, Jake raised an eyebrow. That is not how surveying works, counselor. I stepped forward. I want to press charges for criminal trespass, criminal mischief, and destruction of property against everyone in this group. I have video evidence of everything. Jake nodded. Mr. Morrison, if you can send me that video evidence and come down to the station tomorrow to file a formal report, we will process the charges. Absolutely. Jake turned back to the group. I am issuing citations to all of you for criminal trespass. You will receive a court date in the mail. If I catch any of you on Mr. Morrison's property again without his explicit permission, you will be arrested. Is that understood? There were mumbled acknowledgments. Bridget looked like she wanted to argue more, but Jeffrey kept his hand on her arm. After everyone left, Jake helped me install a new lock on the gate, this time with a protective housing that would be much harder to cut. You might want to consider adding some cameras with audio down here, he suggested. With the kind of evidence you are getting, we can shut this down completely. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate everything you guys have been doing. No problem. Between you and me, that HOA has been causing problems all over the area. Last month, they tried to cite the county for not maintaining County Road 219 to their standards. We had to explain to them that they do not have any authority over county roads either. The next day, I went to the sheriff's station and filed a comprehensive report, including all the video footage from my security cameras. The recording of Bridget claiming they had the right to remove my gate and talking about civil disobedience was particularly damning. Deputy Wilson assured me the charges would be processed through the county attorney's office. I also installed 3 more security cameras around the gate area, all with audio recording capability. Patricia suggested I post additional no trespassing signs every 50 feet along the property line, where it bordered County Road 219. I spent an afternoon in the cold installing signs that read, "Private property no trespassing video surveillance and use violators will be prosecuted." For about a week, things were quiet. The snowbank remained in place, blocking the gate. I kept my driveway clear from the gate to my house, but I left the massive barrier at the entrance intact. My trail cameras showed occasional cars slowing down to look at the gate, but nobody approached it. Then the letters started arriving. First came a cease and desist letter from Jeffrey Paulson, claiming I was harassing HOA members by filing criminal charges. Patricia responded with her own letter detailing all the HOA's illegal activities and threatening a civil lawsuit for damages. Next came a letter from Summit Ridge's development company, stating they were investigating complaints from residents about access issues and implying this might be a breach of some unspecified agreement. Patricia handled that one too, sending them copies of my property deed and a polite but firm letter explaining that their residents' complaints were not my problem. The court date for the trespass citations was set for early February. In the meantime, the county attorney's office contacted me to discuss the charges. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Chen, reviewed all my evidence and seemed both impressed and concerned. "Mr. Morrison, you have an excellent case here. The evidence is clear and damning. However, I want you to understand what you are getting into. The defendants are going to claim they had a good faith belief they had the right to access this road. Their attorney will argue they were not acting with criminal intent. They cut my lock and walked onto my property after being repeatedly told it was private. They have been harassing me for months. How is that not criminal intent?" I agree with you, and I think we can make the charges stick. I just want you to be prepared for a fight. HOAs tend to have resources, and this one seems particularly aggressive. I am prepared. These people need to understand they cannot just take whatever they want. The case was scheduled for trial in March. In the meantime, more snow fell, and I continued to maintain my driveway from the gate to my house while leaving the massive snowbank at the entrance undisturbed. It had become a monument to property rights, visible from County Road 219 and clearly marked with my signs and locked gate. Summit Ridge residents found creative ways to express their displeasure. Someone started a Facebook page called Morrison's Wall of Shame, featuring photos of my snowbank and accusing me of being a bad neighbor. I did not respond. Someone else wrote letters to the editor of the Whitefish Pilot newspaper, complaining about property owners who refused to cooperate with their communities. Again, I did not respond. Patricia advised me to stay quiet and let the legal process work. They are trying to provoke you into doing something stupid. Don't give them ammunition. In mid-February, something unexpected happened. A reporter from the Pilot named Rachel Torres called and asked if I would be willing to do an interview about the dispute with the HOA. I contacted Patricia first. "It is up to you," she said. "There are risks. Anything you say could be used against you, but it is also an opportunity to tell your side of the story publicly. The Facebook posts and letters to the editor are all one-sided right now." I agreed to the interview. Rachel came to my property on a cold Thursday afternoon. She was in her 30s, bundled in a practical winter coat, and she had a photographer with her. We walked down to the gate, and I showed her the property markers, the snowbank, and the locked gate with all my signs. "So explain what happened," Rachel said, her recorder running. I told her everything. The initial encounter with Bridget, the letters claiming authority over my property, the lawsuit, the attempted forced entry, all of it. I showed her the property deed and the court ruling. I explained that Summit Ridge had its own access road and simply wanted to use mine because it was more convenient. "What do you say to people who claim you are being a bad neighbor?" she asked. I would say that being a good neighbor does not mean giving up your property rights. Summit Ridge has functional access to their homes. They want to use my private driveway to save themselves a few minutes of driving time. That is not neighborliness. That is entitlement. The HOA claims you have been harassing them by filing criminal charges. They cut my lock and trespassed on my property at night after a judge had already ruled in my favor. That is not harassment. That is enforcement of the law. What do you want to happen? I want to be left alone. That is all I have ever wanted. I bought property in Montana for privacy and independence. The Summit Ridge HOA is trying to take that away from me, and I will not allow it. The article ran the following week with the headline "Property Rights Dispute. Whitefish Resident Says HOA Trying to Seize Private Driveway." It was fair and balanced, presenting both sides of the story, but the facts were clearly in my favor. The article included a statement from Bridget claiming I was being unreasonable and refusing to work with the community, but it also included photos of my property deed and quotes from the judge's ruling. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The comments section on the online version of the article filled up within hours, and public opinion was heavily on my side. People shared their own HOA horror stories and praised me for standing up for property rights. A few Summit Ridge residents defended the HOA, but they were vastly outnumbered. The negative attention seemed to catch the HOA off guard. Bridget released a statement through Jeffrey Paulson claiming the article was biased and misleading, but it did not gain much traction. The Montana Property Rights Alliance, a libertarian advocacy group, reached out and offered their support if I wanted to turn this into a broader campaign about HOA overreach. I declined politely, explaining I just wanted to resolve my specific situation. The criminal trial finally arrived on March 15th. I met Patricia at the courthouse early in the morning. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Apparently, word had spread in the community and several people had shown up to watch the proceedings. I recognized some faces from Summit Ridge, but there were also people I did not know who came up to shake my hand and wish me luck. The defendants were Bridget Bancroft, Donald Richards, and 3 other HOA members, Sharon Templeton, Michael Vasquez, and Robert Chen. They all sat with Jeffrey Paulson at the defense table, looking nervous except for Bridget, who maintained her usual expression of righteous indignation. Judge Yates was presiding again. She looked at the crowded courtroom and the stack of evidence folders and sighed. This should be straightforward. The People versus Bancroft and others, charges of criminal trespass and criminal mischief. How do the defendants plead? Jeffrey stood. Not guilty, Your Honor, on all charges. The prosecution went first. Linda Chen laid out the case methodically, presenting the property deed, the previous court ruling establishing that this was private property, video evidence of the defendants cutting the lock and entering the property, and audio recordings of their statements claiming they had the right to do so. The video was particularly damaging. It showed clearly the man with bolt cutters approaching the gate, cutting the lock while others watched and encouraged him, and then all 5 defendants walking through the gate onto my property. The audio captured Bridget's statement about removing unlawful barriers and Donald's comment about civil disobedience. When it was the defense's turn, Jeffrey did his best to argue that the defendants had a good faith belief they were allowed to access the road based on their understanding of community rights and the marketing materials they had been shown when purchasing their properties in Summit Ridge. Judge Yates cut him off. Mr. Paulson, I already ruled on the property issue. These defendants knew this was private property. They had been told repeatedly by Mr. Morrison, by law enforcement, and by this court. They cut his lock and entered his property anyway. That is not a good faith belief. That is willful trespass. Your Honor, my clients believed they were exercising their rights as members of a community HOA which has certain powers, not over other people's private property. Mr. Paulson, you are a real estate attorney. You know better than to make these arguments. The trial lasted less than 3 hours. Judge Yates found all 5 defendants guilty of criminal trespass. She also found them guilty of criminal mischief for the destroyed lock. The sentencing phase was brief. I am fining each defendant $500 plus restitution to Mr. Morrison for the damaged lock and gate. Additionally, each defendant will perform 40 hours of community service. I am also issuing a permanent restraining order prohibiting any of you from setting foot on Mr. Morrison's property or attempting to contact him directly. Any violations will result in immediate arrest and additional charges. Do you understand? All 5 defendants nodded, though Bridget looked like she had bitten into something bitter. Furthermore, Judge Yates continued, I am ordering the Summit Ridge HOA to cease all attempts to claim any authority over Mr. Morrison's property. Any further harassment, any additional trespass incidents, any attempts to damage his property or interfere with his use of it will result in contempt charges and potentially civil penalties. This matter is closed. Do not make me see you in my courtroom again. We filed out of the courthouse into the bright March sunshine. Snow was melting everywhere, revealing brown grass and muddy ground. Patricia shook my hand. Congratulations, Kyle. That was about as decisive as it gets. Thanks for everything, Patricia. I could not have done this without you. Send me the bill for the new lock and any other damages you can document. We will file for full restitution plus your legal fees. Over the next few weeks, things finally started to calm down. I received a check from the Summit Ridge HOA for $3,000, covering the damaged lock, fence repairs, and a portion of my legal fees. Bridget resigned as HOA president, reportedly under pressure from other residents who were unhappy with the negative publicity and legal costs the organization had incurred. The snowbank at the entrance to my driveway finally melted in early April, revealing the gate still standing firm with my property signs intact. I kept the gate locked and maintained the security cameras. Occasionally, cars would slow down on County Road 219, and I knew people were looking at the site that had become briefly famous in our small community. But nobody bothered me. Summit Ridge residents stopped attempting to use my driveway. They used their own access road, adding perhaps 3 minutes to their drive into Whitefish. Life returned to the peaceful routine I had sought when I moved to Montana. One warm afternoon in May, I was working in my garden when a car pulled up to my gate. I tensed for a moment, then relaxed when I recognized Deputy Wilson's personal vehicle. He got out and waved. "Hey Kyle, just wanted to check in and see how things are going." I walked down to meet him. "Everything is quiet now, no problem since the trial." "Good to hear." That whole situation got way out of hand. I heard Bridget Bancroft moved away. Apparently, she was not popular with the other Summit Ridge residents after everything came out. What happened to Donald Richards and the others? Still around, keeping their heads down. The HOA brought in new leadership, people who actually understand property law. They have been pretty quiet. "That is all I ever wanted." Jake nodded. "You did the right thing standing your ground." Too many people get pushed around by these HOAs because they do not know their rights or can't afford to fight back. After he left, I walked back to my garden and spent the rest of the afternoon planting tomatoes and peppers. The Montana sun was warm on my back, and I could hear the wind moving through the pines on my property. Everything was exactly as it should be. The legal aftermath continued for a few more months. Patricia filed a civil lawsuit against the Summit Ridge HOA for harassment and damages, seeking compensation for all my legal fees, the property damage, and emotional distress. The HOA's insurance company settled out of court for $25,000. It did not make me rich, but it covered all my expenses and then some. I used some of the money to upgrade my gate system with even better locks and additional security features. I also had a surveyor come out and place permanent markers at 50-foot intervals along my entire property line, each one clearly marking the boundary of my land. No one would ever be able to claim confusion about where my property began and ended. The Facebook page attacking me was taken down, and most of the angry posts on community forums disappeared. A few Summit Ridge residents reached out with apologies, explaining they had been misled by Bridget about the nature of the dispute and my alleged obstruction of their rights. I accepted their apologies, but made it clear my driveway would remain private property. In July, the Montana Property Rights Alliance asked if they could feature my story in their newsletter as an example of successful resistance against HOA overreach. I agreed, and they sent a writer to interview me. The resulting article was titled "One Man Stand Against HOA Tyranny" and was picked up by several other property rights organizations around the country. I received emails and letters from people across America who were fighting their own battles with HOAs. Some of the stories were heartbreaking. Elderly people being fined thousands of dollars for trivial violations, families losing their homes over paint colors or mailbox styles, and communities terrorized by power-hungry board members. I responded to as many as I could, offering encouragement and recommending they document everything and find good lawyers. The experience changed my perspective on homeowner associations. Before this dispute, I had thought of them as mostly harmless organizations that kept neighborhoods tidy. Now I understood the potential for abuse when you give a small group of people unchecked authority over others' property. By autumn, life had truly returned to normal. The gate remained locked, the cameras remained active, and my private driveway remained private. I had successfully defended my property rights against an organization that had vastly more resources than I did, simply by being stubborn and refusing to back down when I was in the right. Winter came again, and with it more snow. I plowed my driveway when I needed to, maintaining a clear path from my house to County Road 219. The gate stood firm, and the signs warned everyone that this was private property. No one tested it. The Summit Ridge residents used their own roads, and I never saw or heard from Bridget Bancroft again. One evening in late November, I was sitting in my living room with a fire crackling in the wood stove when Patricia called. "Just wanted to give you some news," she said. Jeffrey Paulson filed a complaint against Bridget Bancroft with the Montana State Bar Association. Apparently, she had been pushing him to take legal positions he knew were unethical, and after everything blew up, he decided to file a formal complaint documenting her conduct. What will happen to her? Probably nothing directly, since she is not a lawyer, but it creates a record. If she tries to pull this kind of thing again somewhere else, there will be documentation of her past behavior. That is something, I guess. It is more than something, Kyle. You did not just win your own case. You created precedent and documentation that will help other people in the future. You should be proud of that. After we hung up, I thought about what she had said. I had not set out to be any kind of advocate or crusader. I had just wanted to live my life in peace on my own property. But by standing firm when challenged, by documenting everything, and by using the legal system properly, I had accomplished something larger than just protecting my driveway. I had proven that property rights still meant something, that HOAs did not have unlimited power, and that ordinary citizens could fight back successfully against organizations with more money and resources. It was a good feeling. The years that followed were peaceful. The Summit Ridge development continued to grow, eventually reaching its planned capacity of 70 homes. The HOA functioned normally under new leadership, managing common areas and enforcing reasonable rules within their own boundaries. They never again attempted to claim authority over my property. I remained on friendly terms with Deputy Wilson and several other local law enforcement officers who had helped during the dispute. My story became something of a local legend, the kind of tale people told at community gatherings and barbecues. The man who stood up to the HOA and won. I eventually got to know some of my Summit Ridge neighbors, the ones who had not been involved in the dispute or who had apologized afterward. They were generally good people who had been misled by aggressive leadership. We were not close friends, but we waved when we saw each other in town and helped each other out occasionally in the way that rural neighbors do. My property remained my sanctuary. I expanded my garden, built a workshop for woodworking projects, and spent countless hours hiking the acres of forest that belonged to me. The private driveway, the source of so much conflict, became just what it had always been meant to be: a simple road that took me from the county road to my home. The gate stayed locked, the cameras stayed active, and the signs stayed posted. Not because I expected trouble, but because I had learned an important lesson about protecting what was mine. Property rights are not automatic. They must be defended, documented, and enforced. The moment you stop paying attention is the moment someone tries to take them away. Looking back, I do not regret anything about how I handled the situation. I could have given in, could have let the HOA use my driveway to avoid conflict. It would have been easier in the short term. But it would have set a precedent that my property rights were negotiable, that aggressive people could get their way through harassment and intimidation. By standing firm, by building that snowbank and locking that gate, I drew a line that could not be crossed. I forced the issue into the legal system, where facts and property rights mattered more than aggressive personalities and entitlement. And I won, not just for myself, but for the principle that private property means something in America. The locked gate and posted signs remain to this day, a permanent reminder that this is my land, earned with my money and protected by law. No HOA, no matter how well-funded or aggressive, can change that fundamental fact. And in the end, that is what the whole fight was really about. The simple right to own property and control its use without interference from people who have no legal authority over it. It is a right worth defending, worth fighting for, and worth the time, money, and stress it took to protect. Every time I drive through that gate and up my private driveway to my house, I remember what it took to keep it private. And I am grateful I had the stubbornness and resources to see the fight through to the end. Because in America, your property should be yours, and no one should be able to take that away simply because they want it and think they have the power to demand it.